Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome back to FM22. It's Youth Factory. This is episode 52, and we have our intake day here. We also have some updates on finances and what happened with the election during the off season, and then we're just about ready to start a new campaign. Looks like we have a couple goalkeepers this time, where we normally get one in per year, and both goalkeepers are very high on the potential list. In fact, they're the first two guys listed. And at 2 stars, I mean, that's decent rating for the senior team. They might be better than a lot of the options we have at the moment, possibly capable of stepping in at least to number 2 immediately on the depth chart. That could be big. Maybe even number 1, because goalkeeper has been a bit of a weakness for us for a long time. We also have one quality current ability player in Holmdale, and Holmdale is, well, looks like, at least for us, likely to fit in as a striker. Good first touch, good dribbling, good crossing. So where he would fit in as a striker, I don't know. The finishing is tolerable, and he has great technique. He could fit in. He's got good mentals already, for the most part. Though his off the ball is one thing a little lacking, but with good vision, good balance, good agility. Needs to work on his strength quite a bit, but he's a player that, well, outside of being fickle, he's a player that looks like could be in the mix early on. Just needs some work in some areas. And with 11 players showing up in this intake in the elite talent category, possibly having something to do with the fact that we are now in the second tier, much higher level, likewise a much higher financial impact on the club over the last 6 months. Since we were on the verge of wrapping up last season, our youth setup costs went up, and not just marginally. They went up exponentially in a very, very bad way. Is it because we have this elite class that needed a lot of nurturing, or does it have something to do with the fact that we're now at a level that's more representative, that's producing more talent? Well, we'll find out shortly when we really break down this group, this roster. But let's go ahead and switch from here to that discussion about finances. And in recent months, our positive balance declined rapidly to more than $500,000 in the red once again. And that's come down to a massively declining profit margin monthly that has entirely to do with our youth setup. In 5 out of our last 6 months, our youth setup has gone from $35K per month, very steady, to $184. It has gone up by $150,000. $150,000 per month, not per year, per month. That extra $150,000, well, that's going to be pretty devastating to our bottom line. Last season, our TV revenue was $221,000. Our predicted income for this season for TV revenue at a higher level, $275,000. It's only going up by $50,000 for the entirety of the season, not per month, for the season. So we're going to lose an extra $150K per month, and at least on the first benchmark, which this was going to be one of the bigger benchmarks, our total income for the entire year is only going up by $50K. Now, of course, there's going to be other benchmarks, but that's for the whole year. If it was monthly, I would be a little less worried than I am at the moment. I am utterly mortified from this increase. With the intake behind us, we have seen it happen before where the number drops back down after the intake. We didn't see it last year, but we've seen it in previous seasons where we've seen an increase and then we've seen it settle. If we don't see it settle, we're going to be in for a world of hurt, because there's no way that through other means, additional gate receipts, additional season tickets, merchandising, etc., we are not going to make enough. Our sponsorship money, identical to a year ago. We've had 0 new sponsors, and that's already happened. We've already had our period. That's our blue spike here. So we're screwed at the moment, or at least it feels like we are. It may require an intervention. Now, if the 5 out of 6 month spike that we've had goes back down and joins the other month out of the 6 and holds steady there for the remainder of the year, maybe, just maybe, there's enough income boosts across the board that we might be okay. Right now, that seems highly unlikely. In December, we had another election for the board. Again, we're a publicly owned team. Eric Niergaard was the one who took over last time. He is back. He was not completely unchallenged, but he was virtually unchallenged. There was no serious contender that went up against him, and so it was just a very smooth re-election for Niergaard that came with no promises, so nothing changed. And here's a more direct look at our intake group. The AI thought it pertinent to sign all of them, every last one of them, when it's actually quite clear that there's probably 7, 8, I'd say 8 of these players that have literally no chance of ever seeing the field with the senior squad. So why would you ever bother signing them when they are not good enough now or ever? I will very quickly eliminate that group, and then we'll take a closer look at what remains. So while there was supposed to be 11 elite talents, well, that's clearly not the case. We have 6 elite talents, really, I'd say 5 elite talents, and 1 that is in a position that we are quite thin at and is just good enough. If his current ability was below a 50 or even below about a 55, he probably would have been eliminated as well. That is Dubois. So we'll hang on to Dubois. We are left with 1 English goalkeeper in Spencer Mason, both in their 50s. So yes, that does change our look at goalkeepers a little bit. It means that Stensby Jakobsen is going to be gone. Definitely going to be gone, because our standard of goalkeeping, they're all in their 40s outside of Moen. So getting a couple players in their 50s is going to alter. Moen has cracked 60 now, but barely. Maybe a 62, something along those lines. So Zal Wolf, with high potential and a current ability that's not far off from Moen, if he starts to develop this season, could be the starter even as soon as next year. Same with Spencer Mason, for that matter. As he's close enough, if either one of them shows positive development this year, they could easily become the starter very soon. So that's a good plus for us, that we have not 1 but 2 goalkeeping candidates who can easily outshine the ones we have, as development has been so difficult in that position. Then Homdell, 72 current ability with high potential. That is absolutely good enough to pick up a place, potentially anyway, at the senior squad right now. I'll have to compare him to what we have to see if that's something we want to bring in right now, or if we want to give him a year to develop in the youth ranks while we slug it out, in the second tier, trying to hang on and have survival. Foss definitely has the potential, but positionally, I don't know quite how he's going to look. Tackling and marking are good. He does not have other positions, so we'll have to get him trained either in that right mid or center back kind of position. Which one we'll find out based on a number of factors, kind of how well he's distributed along here. 5'9" for Norway. Yeah, that's a bit short. And Ellingson as a center mid in time. He's got some good mentals early on and not too bad in the technical department. But he's quite some ways off first team. So they might have said this was the best intake I've ever had. Some of this speaks to that. I mean, there's 4 solid players here in terms of their mixture of current and potential. And that's a higher number than we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing a couple a year that are legit, and then seeing a couple more that are off, and then a couple more that are tolerable. Here we have the one tolerable, we have the couple that are off, and we have a few that are pretty on it, or even you could argue 4 that are pretty on it. And it looks like 1 ready to contribute potentially right away. The one downside here is none of these, or the one that's ready to contribute right away, not a center back. We have lost Haukeberg. We do have one key position to replace. You would figure with Haukeberg, our chances of survival are pretty good. We are without Haukeberg. We're going to have to dig deep to see what we have in terms of development. I have a half a dozen players that have come up out of the youth ranks into the senior squad. So we'll have to figure out who's going to step up and play the position. Are we back to Jakobsen? If we are, we're in a whole lot of trouble. If we have a better option, be happy to use it. The U19s, well, it's thinned out. There's not much of a roster here, and the 4 players that don't have a spot in the starting lineup or in the 5 bench spots, meaning 16. So the 4 additional means we only have 20 in the U19s rank, which is a good number. And ultimately, the only problem spot is that with 2 new goalkeepers coming in, we have too many goalkeepers, which is something I already noted. But for the youth ranks, I have too many goalkeepers. But for me, it's more about development, and the playing time at U19s doesn't seem to be much of a thing. Zalwolf has a massive advantage, being literally the best current ability goalkeeper we have had in the history of this playthrough. Also having quite good potential with a 132. I mean, on the entire U19s roster, that's the best. One other thing to look at here about the U19s is how far we have come in terms of potential ability. We now have all but the last 5 players, so 15 out of 20 have a potential of 100 or better. You have 3 out of those 5 that have an 89 or better. There's only a couple mid to low 80s that probably are destined to be released. But if they were goalkeepers, that would definitely happen. In fact, if any of those 5 were goalkeepers, that one would be gone immediately. But as none of them are, I will hang on to those guys in the meantime. I've also taken all of the 60 plus current ability players and moved them on up. You can also see that roughly half of the U19s are a 50 plus. So with development and potential, you're looking at a group that, for the most part, is suited to senior squad play as long as they get some development in. That's something that hasn't always been true in the past for us. I've had lots of players graduating to the senior squad only to immediately be cut from the team because it's like, oh gosh, A, you haven't developed, and B, you're probably not going to develop to a state. Their high-end potential was in the 70s or in the 80s, and they were still in the 40s in terms of current ability. That's really starting to not be much of a thing. So eliminating those U19s isn't going to be as big of a deal going forward. And with that rotation, 15, 16, 17, 18, you have about 4 years in the youth ranks, 5 to 6 new players in every intake that have that sort of potential is a perfect round number. I mean, that's right about where we should be on that intake. Now, looking at the senior squad, we're a little bit bloated once again, and that's because we've had 6 or 7 players just come up out of the U19s, and we lost 1 in Haukeberg. So we've added a half dozen players. I'm working on it. 1 has already signed with somebody else, letting them go on a free. I have one who's already gone out on loan in Knudsen, who at 20 still has potential, just hasn't developed terribly well. So give him another year, give him a couple more years going out on loan, and maybe he'll have that breakthrough and take off in development and get good enough. If not, eventually we'll let him go. But in the meantime, Christopher Isle is in that same sort of boat where he's just not good enough, but I don't have the depth at that position to let him go just yet. But this whole group, Adamaj, Good, Stensby Jakobsen, Holm, I've accepted free offers for all of them. So they should be on their way out very soon. Stensby Jakobsen, the only one with potential, but he's been a 42 current ability all these years, and he's 28 now with no development whatsoever. So it's time to let him go, even though he's got 130 appearances, most with our squad, I think, if not entirely. I don't remember if I've sent him out on loan at all, but with the 5.8, he doesn't develop. He's stagnated this entire time. Also added to that list of 4 more, plus the one that's already gone, is Berg Fossum. Berg Fossum clearly better than those guys, but with only a 68 potential, yeah, he's not going anywhere. He's not going to play. And probably Kent Pena, I think it's about time I let him go as well, but we'll see once I've really analyzed the squad if that's the right move to make. Probably is. So Kent Pena might be on his way out as well, but he has played okay, but he's not developing at all either. I think he's been right about that 58 for the entirety of his time with the team. Looking up a bit higher, we can see the new faces popping up as the guys who don't have a role at the moment in our 7 deep. So Heistad is one of those who's been called up, but at just 17, this is more about development. He didn't just age up. He was in the U19s. Janssen is one of the ones who did just come up as an 18-year-old, but at 67, absolutely ready to make a mark. And as he's a defensive mid/center mid, there's probably your nail in the coffin for Pena that we might be letting him go as well. Hagensen, we brought him up a year ago. I think we sent him out on loan. So that's going to be a factor as he has that chance to, I think he did develop some from where he was. He might have been a 61, 62 last season. He's a candidate for that starting lineup because Jakobsen way down here as a 61 and getting worse. And he is 5'3". He is quite small. Holmdahl, has he already developed a +1 in his current ability in just a few days? Wasn't he a 72? Wouldn't that be something? It's only been a few days since the intake. About a week anyway. 10 days. And then Gankarzik. Gankarzik is somebody who we sent out on loan last season and came back fairly well developed from where he was. He was in the low 60s. He just wasn't well shaped in terms of the attribute distribution, but maybe now as a 74, he's ready to contribute. He is asking to leave, and all of those with the SPT, that's support. That's support for him to leave. But he'll quickly change his mind if he's actually getting playing time with us. The candidates, though, the top candidates that we have, it's to replace, I don't know, maybe Lavas at striker. If they're better than he is. On paper, it looks like they are, but are they actually better? And then, of course, the other thing is it Haagensen? Is it going to be Fawoli going back and playing center back with Hermansen taking over at defensive mid? With the addition of Janssen to now be the backup? I have a couple options. I'm going to break that down and figure out who is going to make their way into the lineup. And that's going to be more about, less about their actual current ability on paper and more about the distribution of those attributes and who's going to play the role better, who's better suited to it, who's not a, Jakobsen 5'3", especially as we're trying to fill a center back role. We would like to get that height. As we're up to the second tier now, you can't get away with being super short in the position any longer. It does matter. Another thing that stands out to me is how much younger the squad has gotten. And this has everything to do with the climb up the ladder. We were in those lower divisions in those first years, and so we were lucky to have one quality intake player. Even though our youth level was perfect, right? We had the perfect facilities and everything. We, A, had very low reputation, but more importantly, B, were in the lower reaches of Norway. So our intakes were just inherently worse. We already saw this season our reputation has built up a little bit, but we moved up to a higher tier. Cost us a lot more money, but our intake definitely was better. There was quite a few players with that beyond 100 potential. There were quite a few players with a 50 or better current ability. That was not something we were getting in previous intakes. Most of the early intakes, the first 10 years, we'd have one player at 50 or better. And, twice we had high current ability players, something along those lines. Fawoli was one of those who came in as, what was he, a 68 out of 77 or something, and then he very rapidly became a 71, and he's stalled there ever since. But he came in at a 70 out of 77, whatever it was. We have not been having Ulebergs, who came in the high 60s. We have not been having Holmdales, who come in the low 70s already, and potential ability. We didn't have your Bergams, who came in the low 60s. But we're seeing a real youth movement now. Of course, some of these guys, right? Some of these guys are going to be gone. Another 4 or 5 players are going to be headed out here soon. But 15, 16, 17. Okay, so we're not super, super young. I mean, we're only getting that one odd player here and there that is good enough when they're still in their early teens and not yet adults, or mid-teens, I guess. But the 18s, 19s, lots of them. The 20s, the 21s, making up a bulk of the team. Now, not too many starters out of all that. I mean, they're still on the outside looking in. But look at how little we have in terms of older players. Beyond the age of 23, I have just 6 on the entire roster. That's it. And, it's 2034. We've been at this for many seasons now. Stensby Jakobsen is one of those first-year guys, as is Melvin Jakobsen. Calzi and Severetti. I mean, we had a good first intake, but then it always tailored off, and it always does. It's like once you start getting a few things in place, It's weird how that works. Your first intake's almost always better than your second, third, fourth intakes, and then you climb that ladder. But so we do have those few guys early on, but outside of that, we have Ostby and Lovas, and that's it left on the roster for a 4-year span. And then we have Sabani and Bergam. That's it, that next group. It's not until you get to here in the last 6 years, as in until we basically hit the third tier, that we've had anything sustainable where we're getting a group that is really making up the bulk of the roster. Now, yes, a lot of these guys have been starters for a long time, and so slowly developed and have retained those positions. And so, yes, the youth doesn't have all of the slots, but the youth is making up the vast majority of the overall squad. And that's interesting to me. And we're not becoming a whole bunch of players in their mid-late 20s making up the bulk of the squad, and soon reaching a point where they're going to get old and start to decline and need replacing. It's not really the case at all. It's really only that handful of players. And, we're on the verge of parting ways with Stensby Jakobsen. We're on the verge of parting ways with Melvin Jakobsen, who's already declining, and at 5'3" is just, he's never going to be good enough to play this position. He does not have the quality, and he's getting worse. He has leadership. That's about it. Talzi, somebody who, if he didn't have great potential, we'd probably already be parting with, but I'd love to get a little bit of money for him. Severede, just a 68. These guys are on the verge of losing their spots. Lovas on the verge of losing his spot. Ostby is the only one of the old guard that is definitely not going anywhere. He's not developing. He's stalled out, but he's still easily one of our best players. The rest of these guys, not quite good enough. They're on the fringes of the first 11 right now, or on the fringes of the team entirely. Just interesting to note. All right, enough stalling here. I'm going to do some work. I'm going to figure out the lineup, what changes I want to make, whether it's to the reserves, as in the bench, and obviously that one last starting spot, how I want to work that out, how I want to sort that out, and then I'll let you know. Next time, we'll be starting the season off. One more quick thing, just to show you what I was just talking about from another perspective. Here is that roster. Halfway point, right around Heisted, is actually even below the halfway point slightly. But from Heisted and above, that's our best players in terms of current ability. Lovas, of course, they are on same current ability, so take it with a grain of salt on that part. But from here and above, or let's say the 67s and above, which is top half and maybe one or two players below it, all of them are 23 or younger, with just two exceptions. Severede, who's right there at the bottom, he's only +1 compared, and then Ostby, and that's it. And they're both in their mid-20s. I mean, they have plenty of years left before they're going to see a decline and need replacement. So the youth movement is good. The development in this group has been evident since we got that training facility up to a 3. Since we got playing in the third tier and had better intakes. That combination is making a difference. What we need, though, is we need to take that training facility to another level if we're going to get into the top tier and beyond, get into Europe, and actually do something with this group and ultimately go back to the original goal of the playthrough, which was raise the intake level in Norway, which has been tweaked in that major update that came out about a month ago, as it wasn't quite going how they wanted it to go, the dynamic youth ratings of a nation. So it's a good thing that's been tweaked. It's a good thing we didn't already get into Europe prior to that. So it's all good that we're still at this stage, at this point in time. But we do want to keep climbing. We don't want to stall out. If this 150K a month extra in expense is not countered, we're going to have to address it somehow. Either manually increasing the fan base to get even more people coming, decreasing costs somehow. I got to adjust something somewhere, somehow, but we'll see first. Instead of letting you know the results, let me let you see it for yourself. So Haagensen is the top candidate because he's got the best current ability of the options, other than maybe Fawoli. Fawoli does have a better current ability than Haagensen does. We'll have to take that into account, but that involves a separate comparison to determine whether that's a better option. So starting with Haagensen as the leading contender. First off, the lowest potential replacement is Mats Harstead. Mats Harstead, clearly not going to be good enough. He's worse in most ways. He's equal on physical. He is a little bit better aerially, but he's worse across the board otherwise. Significantly so that not even close. Jakobsen is that next candidate up the list, and Jakobsen comes with a serious issue, and that is he is awful aerially, and it shows here. Haagensen, not as good mentally. Jakobsen at 27 has developed and was always good there. That was his strong suit. He was the captain. I have finally replaced him this season. Bergam is now the captain of the team. With Jakobsen not happy, but accepting that he's no longer captain, it's making things a lot easier. He's going to have a lot less influence over the squad. And looking at this, it's not even close. Even though he is better mentally, Haagensen is either equal or better, and then much better aerially. And while he's not great, it's much better aerially. We need that. And with limited options, that brings us to Fawoli. How would Fawoli fit into the back line instead of the defensive mid? And looking at this, you're looking at two candidates that honestly it could go either way. Fawoli is definitely slower, a fair bit. I kind of like Haagensen's pace. Fawoli does have an advantage mentally, though it's marginal. He does have an advantage aerially, also marginal. They are equal in defending. They are equal in physical. Fawoli, a little bit better attacking, though that's a mixed bag. There's technical to go with it. These are similar players that have different strengths. Neither one is overly weak in a concerning sort of way. They just have different strengths. So I could see playing either player. That then means we need to make a different comparison here. All right, so starting with Hermansen, Fawoli, much better defending. Now, my defensive midfielder, I want to be creative. However, priority number one is ball recovery. That is that role. That is what I expect out of my defensive mid, because we don't have as much width. Our wide midfielders who we expect to drop back. I need a strong defensive mid who's going to help take away the middle of the field from the opposition so that we don't have two great areas of weakness. We already have a great area of weakness, and that weakness of the lack of width is one reason why Jakobsen is not only less than ideal, but literally terrible for an option. Our weakness is on the outside. We're strong in the middle. If I also make us weak in the middle, then we're vulnerable in too many places. So I need a strong defensive mid because I need center backs who can head the ball. I need guys who can clear the ball away, because you're going to see a lot more crosses coming in when we are strong up the middle but weak on the outside. So here's Janssen. And Janssen is a ball-winning midfielder, first and foremost. And while he's a little down on the defending, it's not bad compared to Fawoli. Mental, he's already equal, even though he's only 18 years of age. He's better physically. That's going to help make up for the lack of defending. That'll counter that with the extra strength. He is faster. That's going to really help him cover some ground because we don't have four across the middle here. He's the only man in his line. He's the only one anchoring that midfield and supporting that back line. So actually, extra speed could give him a slight advantage compared to Fawoli. Attacking, I'd say they're similar. When you average out vision, attacking, and technical, he's similar. He's developing, unlike Fawoli, unlike Hermansen, meaning he'll get better. The one concern is he's a bit worse aerially. But I'd say this is just about a wash, and that extra speed and stronger physicals, along with potential, means I actually probably want to get Janssen into the mix. I want to get him out there. I want to see him develop and overtake and earn his way into that starting role. So that does give me a legitimate chance to then move Fawoli to that center back where he is strong aerially and fairly good defending, just a little slow. That means I need to watch for one more thing when it comes to Fawoli. How does he compare with the other two center backs that he would partner with if we are going to bump him back there? First, we go with Gillo, who is the weaker of the pair. Gillo, slightly faster, better physically, better aerially, but not as good of a defender, not as good mentally, and definitely not as good in ball distribution. Meaning Fawoli is actually a little bit better in Gillo than my opinion, or at least similar. Severetti is all over the place, but Severetti, it shows that he's our strongest option right now. A little bit better speed, better physical, better defending by a decent margin, better aerially by a decent margin. Terrible mentals though, so he's inconsistent and provides very little offensive support. I think Fawoli fits in okay with this bunch, with the exception being how slow is he? He's slow. That's a slow back line. That favors Haagensen. So I'm in a weird place. I'm in a place where I think I want to try Fawoli on that back line a little bit. I want to try Haagensen on that back line a little bit. I want to try Janssen in that defensive mid spot a little bit. I don't want to try Hermansen there. So my two takeaways is that I kind of want to give Haagensen and Janssen a chance, but I also don't want to leave Fawoli out necessarily. So looks like I'm going to have a bit of squad rotation for the season to come. That should be interesting. We'll see how we match up against a lot of the opposition. In terms of height, that's another factor. Fawoli at 6'1" and 174. Haagensen 6 foot, 171. Pretty similar on that. Janssen also clocks in at 6'1" and 171. So all three of them similar in that regard. One good sign is we have tripled season ticket sales from a year ago. Season ticket sales last year were identical to the year before. It had not been changing. We had had the same number of season ticket holders for multiple seasons, pretty much the entire time we were in that second tier. So going up, and we see it triple immediately, and I'm not sure if this is done for the year yet. It doesn't say that they're expecting more. There might be a few more because the season itself is still close to a month before it's going to start. So usually that goes right up until a week or two before the season begins. I'm not sure if we'll get many more, but we might get 10, 15, 20 more possibly. 15-year-old Holmdale, of course the still developing young Uleberg, and then young players in Haagensen and Janssen. They all look like solid options, and there's a good 7 players that we're eliminating down at the bottom end of the roster, and then there's a number of guys we've had to rely on for many years that just weren't good enough, that we're not going to have to rely on anymore. Jakobsen, one of those very notable exclusions from the roster kind of going forward. I don't think we're going to need to use him much at all anymore. Berg Fossum is somebody we've had to use quite a bit. Pena is somebody we've had to use quite a bit. We're going to be letting two of those guys even go entirely. Stensby Jakobsen is somebody we've had to rely on a lot with a ton of starts for him. He's about to be gone. Christopher Al is somebody who has made a ton of appearances. 12 goals. He hasn't been terrible. He has speed. He has nothing else. So we're finally moving on from a lot of these guys, and it's good. Holmdel, looking at him, he is best suited to replace Christopher Al. He is suited to be a winger. So we're going to develop him into that right mid position. He's not much of a striker. He doesn't beat Lavas. None of these guys right now beat Lavas. Lavas is an incomplete player, but Lavas... Actually, we'll go ahead and look from Holmdel. Holmdel's not far off. I mean, he's better in a number of ways than Lavas and will develop. And, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy and maybe I need to put him in over Lavas, see how he does, give him a shot, get some squad rotation in. But Lavas, he's a good attacker. He has good vision, good technicals, and is a good tacker, unlike so many others. He's just incomplete, especially doesn't give us much defensively at all, or aerially. Holmdel is a bit more well-rounded. I hadn't compared these two head-to-head. Got something to think about here. Could it be a youth revolution? A few new young players making their way in, plus an Oleberg who was an intake player from last year. Could be. We'll see how things shake up in the early season. But that's going to do it for this episode. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.